Hello and welcome to the Domestique Cooldown for Stage 9 of the Tour de France. It is Sunday of the first week. We've got through our second weekend of racing on what was supposed to be another boring sprint day, and we had anything but. It did start actually looking like a boring sprint day with two unknown riders from the same team, I guess, in Jonas Rickaert and rider by the name of Mathieu van der Poel, who in the end showed some promise. So I'm sure if he keeps going, it might not have worked for him today, but he might get some results in the future if he keeps that up. We
You
saw
may
some
get that block
echelons.
in the contract.
Yeah, exactly. It's good to see the smaller teams have a dig off the front.
Yeah.
Um, we did see some echelons today. So nervous day in the peloton for a while, and then it really did kick off around 80 k's to go. So Van der Poel and Rickaert had a gap of around 5 minutes at that point, and that started tumbling very quickly once the pace in the peloton lifted. We then saw some splits in the peloton with a few riders caught out of position. Wout van Aert, we spotted him. He had to do a monster effort to close across to a split that he had missed. Oscar Onley, also a notable rider from the GC that missed the split, and he had to get his whole team to weld that one back together. And it was mostly Visma Lisa Black on the offensive, I think, in the crosswinds. And we saw once they kicked things off, everyone else jumped in mostly for self-preservation rather than to put others in danger. I think just in that situation, it was better to be in the front swapping off, as it always is, rather than in the doom line at the back. The break actually was almost caught at 30 kilometers to go. It was less than 30 seconds. It looked like all of this work was for nothing, and they were going to get caught about the same time as your other standard TV breakaways that we would see from the small teams. But the peloton hit a section of tailwind, which meant it wasn't going to split. There was a bit of a lull, and it got back out to 2 minutes. So they looked like they really had a chance until around 16 k's to go. The peloton hit another crosswind section. Noticeably from this point, there had been quite a few riders dropped, including basically all of Pogacar's teammates were out the back, and he was left to surf the peloton solo, which didn't look like the safest thing to be doing because it was pretty chaotic. There wasn't any major crashes at the end that I noticed anyway. We'll have to see the washout. There's a few crashes earlier in the stage with that nervousness, but this pace ultimately ended up bringing back the breakaway. Van der Poel was the sole survivor after Rickaert just absolutely destroyed himself and looked like he cramped pretty hard in the last 10 Ks. Van der Poel was caught basically going under the 1 kilometer to go kite. And then there wasn't many trains left, so it was a bit of a messy sprint with Milan finding himself in good position to open up his sprint, basically where I think he would like to anyway. And Merlier had his wheel and was just simply too quick for him. So it was Merlier winning by around a wheel over Jonathan Milan and Arnaud Delis in third. Aidan Burgess, what did you think?
Yeah, well, I think for starters, our two picks came one and second. So I think we might be starting to get this tipping game on song.
I got the monkey off the back today.
Yeah, so mine came in second, which was a bit disappointing. But yeah, you proved to be right. That doesn't do anything for the sprint classification. So we still have business as usual there with Merlier in the green jersey, is my understanding. I noticed a couple of things. Number one, I think you'll be feeling a little bit better today because MVDP, I noticed, did have his mouth open in the break. So I think that might be making you feel a little bit better about yourself. You've commented in the past about how you hate seeing him just nose breathing.
Well, it's funny that you touched on that because I just thought I've spent this whole week doing stupid long range attacks like what these two did today, and I thought they're just going to go out there and win by 5 minutes and make all of us so-called breakaway specialists, or in my case at least enthusiasts, look silly and make it look like you can just ride away and win if you choose to, which I was a little bit happy, I guess, to see them at least find it quite difficult. And then it would have been really, I would have actually preferred, being the breakaway fan I am, to see at least one of them stay away, but they did get mown down. But good to see that even some of the best in the world find it pretty difficult to hold off a storming peloton for 170k.
Yeah. So that was one of the things that I noticed, which, I just love seeing two blokes out the front having a bash and just leaving it all out there. We are coming into the end. It's probably Van der Poel's last chance before tomorrow. He's going to fade from tomorrow. I think maybe in the back of his head, he did think he could potentially go back into the yellow if he managed to get that break. I'd like to pick your brains. How do you think Caden Groves is feeling on a day that could potentially suit him to see two of his teammates and his last man on the lead out go off the front? Like, how would you be feeling? I guess, you're not a sprinter, but how do you think he's feeling about that?
I did find that strange. Knowing Caden to the small extent that I do, he is too good a bloke to kick up a stink in the team bus and say, why didn't we ride for me? And I'm sure it was a plan before the stage. Whether they thought it would play out that way is a different story. I think they probably didn't assume that they would get no reaction from the peloton whatsoever when you have someone of the caliber of Van der Poel attacking from kilometre zero. But it would have been a set play. I think Caden isn't the kind of guy that would be too pissed off about those guys having a crack at it that way. And you even saw him intentionally getting in the way along with a few of the other Alpecin teammates, just blocking to try and keep them away. So he was doing the team role there. I think he'd be a little annoyed that he couldn't sprint better himself, even with no lead out, because actually most sprinters had no lead out. Merlier especially, his lead out were completely out of the bunch even. So I think he'd more be annoyed at himself than the team, I'd say, in that situation. And also for him getting to do the tour, he was never coming in as the main sprinter, so it's not as if they've just turned on him. The fact that he even had the opportunity, I guess, to step into that main sprinter role is added bonus for the one day that he has done it so far. And I'm sure he will get more opportunities with the lead out like Van der Poel before. But again, it's sort of Van der Poel did that lead out perfectly for him yesterday and he simply didn't have the legs. So I don't know whether he put his hand up or the infamous Roodhoff brothers basically just said, yeah, that's your one chance, mate. You're done. Give the other guys a go now. But don't exactly know how it would have played out in the team bus. But I think, as I'm sure, they came pretty close to pulling it off. So you can't fault the tactics too much there.
Yeah. Look, at the end of the day, for the viewers, it was the best product that it could have been. I think Caden Groves getting over in the end versus Van der Poel and, Rickaert was caught before them, but Van der Poel getting caught with 800 metres to go made for a fantastic spectacle, and it would have been a much drier affair were there not those two guys out there. I think that there was at one point they were looking at going for the fastest Tour de France stage ever. I'm assuming, seeing as the peloton really sat up towards the end, I'm assuming that they didn't end up achieving that. But I think they were saying it was 50.9 kilometers an hour average speed is the fastest, and they were about 49 point something. So I think, like yesterday, where we said thank you to the Total Energy riders for your sacrifice, we appreciate you. I think today we've got to just say, you know what, hats off, guys. And it was fantastic from a product perspective. Like we said, two stages that on paper would have been very boring stages, and at least maybe 40% of them were actually interesting to watch for both yesterday and today. So I think that's something to say for a two-man breakaway, which actually goes into the next thing that I was going to ask you. We're actually seeing this quite a lot, like two men going out and having a go. Is this delusional? Is there some sort of rationale behind two people going for a breakaway? Is it the fact that the peloton's more willing to let two guys go as opposed to 7, 8, 9, or even 10 people go? Just seems that we're not seeing those big breakaways of yesteryear.
I think we will see the big breakaways in the mountains. So it tends to be more chance of the breakaways sticking in the mountain stages, because the guys that would win if it was a peloton on a mountaintop finish, for example, are the GC riders. The GC teams aren't necessarily going to want to spend that energy to bring it back when the GC is the main goal. on the sprint days like this, you've got teams that are just devoted purely to getting sprint results here, like Quick Step, like Little Trek. Basically, they've got some secondary objectives. Obviously, Evenepoel is a pretty big one. Skelmos as well. But for these guys, it's a massive opportunity for a stage win to bring it back. They're not going to need as many of those riders later in the week, I guess, to bring it back. And then also, part of that tactic, I guess, from Alpecin's perspective, is they were going to probably be the ones having to chase again if they didn't do that. So that would have been like Jonas Rickaert was going to sit on the front for half the day anyway, I guess, to try and bring it back for a sprint. Why it's been 2 up recently in the same team, I'm not quite sure. I think from a working together perspective, it's amazing how much harder you can go when it's just your teammate there, because if you've got 2 guys from 2 different teams, there's always that thought in the back of your mind, or even if you've got 6 guys from different teams, you're always thinking, I got to also beat these guys at some point. It's it's kind of like if you've watched Survivor, there's the alliances formed, but then you've got to stab everyone in the back at the end. So there's always that kind of thing. Whereas when you've got teammates, they're just happy to completely drill it the whole time. They're also going to share food, water, everything like that. There's always going to be a little bit more cooperation, which gets you a lot further. I think, it's interesting that the biggest surprise for me, honestly, with that was that no one else decided, oh, hang on, I might jump in because these 2 crazy strong riders that probably can just ride at 50k an hour for the whole day, which they did. I might jump on that train. No one decided to do that. I think part of it is almost that people at the start thought it was a joke and just thought these guys are just doing their dummy attack, which there was a bit of the other day when no one wanted to attack. You saw some of the big names attacking, almost pretending, and they might have thought that was the case, and all of a sudden they had 3 minutes, and then that was the break of the day sorted.
Well, hell, it might have even been the case. Like we're talking about the potential for Caden Groves. Maybe it was initially sort of a let's see if we can bluff some people into doing something, and then they got away, and you're sort of looking at each other thinking, well, what do we do? And I guess you look at your teammate and you say, well, let's go on with this lad. Let's see what happens. So yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. The only other thing from me is yesterday I got some people messaging me on Instagram saying that they think that Milan should have been relegated for his sprint yesterday. Now, I've had a look at it, and he puts a shoulder into I think it was a FDJ rider, but I may be incorrect there.
Yeah. Israel.
I don't think there's anything in it. Israel. The damn jerseys look exactly the same. I don't think there's anything in it. But then again today, he did get involved in some argy-bargy. Do you think there's anything in there in regards to yesterday, and did you think his line was fine today?
I thought, like, yesterday it was a definite shove, but I think in that situation it was completely safe. If he was pinned on the barriers, the Israel rider, I don't know if it was, I think it was Jake Stewart who was doing the lead out at that point. If he's pinned on the barrier and he's got nowhere to go, I think that's then it's a completely different story. But there was no danger in what he did yesterday, I think, and I kind of like to see that, to be honest, as part of sprinting. It's tricky then because you get the situation which was similar where Cockard crashed and brought down, well, didn't quite crash, but where the Philipsen crash happened the other day in the intermediate sprint, where it's just a bit of bumping. So it's a tricky one. Like in that case, Stewart was completely ready for the contact because you're expecting the sprinter to step out at some point, and that's Milan just clearing space for himself to step out and do that. So yeah, like it's sort of it's a tricky one because it really is a grey area in terms of, do we only give yellow cards or fines or relegations if someone crashes, which that shouldn't be the case, because I think there's plenty of times where if a rider doesn't touch the brakes, well, if a rider touches the brakes, then the person doesn't end up getting a fine because then they don't crash. So then you're almost encouraging sprinters to keep sprinting into someone's wheel or into their hip when they're getting chopped, so that that person will then get the relegation, and then in doing so, they're endangering themselves. So It is a tricky one for me. Yesterday wasn't enough for a yellow card or a relegation. It definitely wasn't intentional. I'm going to push this guy out of the way to move out. And that, for me, like, that's something I would do in a lead out myself. Like when I'm leading out other riders and we're boxed in, just basically lean on someone to get out and create that space for the train to come through behind me. Again, like when someone's there expecting the contact, it's not going to cause a crash, and for me, not worthy of a relegation. But it's a tricky one because it is getting pretty close to that line there.
I had a similar feeling, again, watching the sprint line. I watched it several times, and there was space, and Milan has simply moved into that space, and in doing that, I think, like you said, in quite a controlled and as safe as you can get in a sprint, he has made contact with another person. To an extent, sprinting, I think, is a contact sport. And I
Yeah,
think
it is.
every sprinter buys into the fact that you are going to get some argy-bargy. It's the reason why I don't contest bunch sprints, because I don't want to get involved in that. So I think the yellow card system does need to be consistently applied, because the intention is to disincentivize people from going into situations where they cause a crash, as opposed to being retroactive where you punish people after the crash. And I think that's where the frustration comes from. People have seen incidences in races leading up to this Tour de France. And then again, the big one was the Jasper Philipsen incident. Again, a situation where I don't actually think anyone was in the wrong there, but I think people are wanting to see some yellow cards dished out to try and crack down on this before things like the Philipsen crash happen.
Yeah, I would agree with that. What going on to new things that have been implemented actually, and one thing I did notice from today is the concussion test being used in a race. Now, I'm not a doctor. I've had plenty of concussion tests done on me, but I don't know how much you can gain from there. How many fingers am I holding up in terms of, I've had plenty of concussions in the past and never have I failed to identify 3 fingers as opposed to 2 or 1 fingers. So it was good that it was done. I think it was an Intermarché rider, Zimmerman. I have a feeling that he was the one that had the concussion test done. And yeah, it was good to see it done. Good to see also that he was allowed to pace back to the peloton after being held up by the race doctor to have that done.
I think there were two. I think there was a Nuno X rider I think there was a Nuno X rider as well that had similar. But yeah, I think there were 2 concussion tests done in the race. But yes,
yeah,
I
and
agree.
I think that's good to see. Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know how much you can pull from it either, but at least we're at a point where they're pulling riders out if they suspect that they have a concussion, and at least it's done by an independent doctor as opposed to it being done by a team doctor, which removes that incentive to try and push people back into the race. I think we're seeing that across all sports. I know NRL has recently implemented that in New South Wales. I think AFL is doing the same thing. And yeah, it's good to see across all sports, because TBIs are awful and cyclists suffer so many of them. It's crazy.
Yeah, definitely. I'm in the double figures myself and have very fortunately been able to get through since this protocol's been implemented, fortunately been able to get through. But yeah, then my teammate also this week suffered a concussion, didn't get a test on the day until I basically rode up to him in the race and asked, I saw the skin completely ripped off his back and asked, my first words were, how bad is it? And I just got a blank stare back at me and I don't know what happened. And I thought, okay, well, this bloke is 100% concussed. At that point, the best bet is to get off your bike straight away. We had a 10K straight run into the finish, and my medical assessment of the situation, which is completely unqualified, was that instead of waiting for 40 minutes on the side of the road in the heat for the broom wagon, that we could just roll in at about 20k an hour, which is what we did. But yeah, it's it's going to be tricky to do across every race to the same level as what we're seeing in the Tour de France. But I think the fact that it's even making the coverage in the Tour de France is going to be good for races like this one that I'm in, Point Pro, second level, second tier race, to hopefully when you see a rider with any damage to their helmet whatsoever, or that has just suffered a big crash of any, even if you don't see the head hit the ground necessarily, any just big crash is going to cause some whiplash, which shakes your brain around in your head, to get those concussion tests and to allow the rider then to pace back to the peloton is a really important part as well, which we saw today, because then the rider isn't worried about losing their whole race because of having to do this assessment, because they know they're going to be able to safely come back to the peloton.
Yep. And maybe even looking at, I don't know, is that a situation where the rules have been relaxed in regards to being able to draft behind teams' cars if you've had a concussion test?
Yeah, I'm not sure if the rules have actually been written any differently, but the how they're being implemented has definitely changed. So the first time this came in was James Knox at the Tour Down Under, I think 3 years ago now, and he had a big crash, had a concussion test, as it was the first time race that was implemented that you had to have a concussion test when you suffered a head knock, and then he was disqualified for pacing back on through the convoy for too long after the impact. So I think that obviously kicked up a big fuss throughout the cycling world, and the rules, I don't think, while they've been rewritten at all, have been implemented a little differently to allow that. And we saw like Zimmerman blatantly on the coverage sitting behind a car for 20 Ks today, and I haven't seen anything in the results sheet, and I'll just check that now. But yeah, like from everything I heard, no penalty there, and it would be silly if there was a penalty, because he's been forced to sit there on the side of the road to follow procedure, and it looks like he's got through safely with no indication in the results sheet. Just now I'm looking at it, noticeable DNF today. Terrible news for UAE. Joao Almeida did pull the pin. Honestly, great news for him long-term health-wise, because clearly if he is suffering at the back before the race really kicked off, he's not all that well. And as banged up as he was, admirable to try and kick on, but I think the right decision's clearly been made if he has decided to pull the pin, because he's a pretty tough bastard from all reports. So good to see that the team made the right call and just pulled him from the race so that he can just go home and recover and have a long and healthy career, hopefully.
Yeah, and it you never want to see it. You never want to see, I mean, you would never want to win a race because someone crashes out. You would never want to, like, as a spectator, you don't want to see a race get shaken up because someone crashes out. But with that being said, it does change, I guess, the equation that UAE is looking at. And it will be interesting to see how they respond to that. Almeida was going to be one of Pogacar's key climbing lieutenants in the mountains, and that's now. Why do they Chinese? I get that they do it at 11:30 at night, but they were doing fireworks at 5:30 today when it was light out. I don't understand
broad daylight fireworks. Yeah,
it's so bizarre. But anyway, I think that's interesting. And the last thing that I wanted, just shut that window so that it's not too loud. God, they're close. The last thing that I noticed, RK is looking incredible at the moment for Vacklin. They were
super good
again. Really good to see from a team that is really struggling. Awesome to see that they're right up there, and they again looked like one of the strongest teams coming into the finish. And it wasn't for the sprint win; it was to protect their GC rider, who's coming third overall in GC at the moment, which is crazy.
Yeah, super cool to see them up there. Speaking of protecting, we'll go into Domestique of the day to rip through it. So for me, couldn't go past anyone other than Jonas Rickaert today. He's probably been deserving of it on other days for the job that he does. And I've raced plenty against him in Belgium and plenty of other races. And he probably doesn't get anywhere near the amount of praise that he deserves for the work that he does for that team. The reason that they're able to finish off so many races so well, whether it's classics, whether it's sprint finishes, is just him keeping the guys all in good position. And they mentioned it in commentary, but he is very much the enforcer. You don't mess with him in the bunch. He's not necessarily the most popular guy amongst other sprint trains because of this, but within the Alpecin team, I'm sure he is the first person to get a high five after the race on the bus, and he would be the best bloke to have in the trenches with you.
Yeah, well, I had him as well. He absolutely emptied himself today to try and drop Van der Poel off. Excuse me, he really looked like he was struggling at his tongue hanging out at one point. He looked like one of those old Looney Tunes cartoons where Wile E. Coyote's tongue just falls out onto the table. Yeah, it was hardcore, and yeah, just an absolute shift by him. So because you've taken my Domestique of the day, the other one that I had, I really like seeing Domestique Jonas rolling turns on the front to try and make a break in the crosswinds.
Yeah, that was cool. And also Evenepoel has been on Domestique duties a bit for Merlier. So Merlier a few times was grabbing Remco's wheel. Remco quite happy to push a bit of wind because he's pushing a bit less than everyone else because of how aero he is, and keeps him out of trouble. So it was really cool actually to see all the GC guys getting amongst it there. And yeah, it's a real team game in the crosswinds. You can't just sit behind your team and hide, because then you'll just be stuck in the gutter at some point or just get shuffled back too far. So yeah, that you really see the teams come to play when it's splitting up like that.
And just quickly on Remco before we move on to the dickhead of the day, I actually was really impressed with his positioning today. For someone that often gets criticised for his positioning, there was a split in the peloton at one point where 3 or 4 riders created an echelon, and Remco was on the back of that, and I was surprised to see him there, to be honest. And it looked like he was doing a lot of his positioning by himself today. It looked like he was just surfing wheels, and it was really good to see. It gives me a lot of hope for Remco later on in the tour if he's that confident with his positioning today.
Yeah, and I said it the last few days as well at the Mer de Bretagne stage. He just looks like he's on since that TT. Great to see him bounce back from that crash. And yeah, I think the biggest thing, no time gaps. He at no point did Poggy or Jonas look like they were going to lose time on him, but more just the confidence for himself, just knowing that he can sit there in when everyone in that peloton is fighting for position there. It's not like going into a climb where it's only the GC guys. There it was really on. So to see him there, he'll be super happy. We'll jump into the dickhead of the day. So for me, it's not a specific person today. I only saw one person do it on the telecast, and he did it successfully, and that was Wout van Aert, who I mentioned before. But the dickhead of the day, and I've been calling people out on it here in the last few days of crosswinds that we've had in the race I'm at the moment. But it's the rider that when you're in the second echelon or chasing back to the front, you've got a perfect echelon rolling, you're about to get there, or you're just sitting there and everyone's working well, and the rider that jumps across by themselves in the gutter or just comes through, like instead of rolling through like everyone else, giving everyone a set, just gets towards the front, uses that speed that everyone else has given them, and then just goes into the gutter and tries to ride across by themselves. And if you get there and no one else does, then you're a hero, which Wout was that today. I've seen it, I think, once out of the 20 people I've seen attempt it since the last few days here in the crosswinds that we've had. But if you leave everyone behind when they're working well in that second echelon to come back and try and go across by yourself and don't make it, you're going to be the least popular person in the peloton. And yeah, I saw it multiple times yesterday, everyone just laughing at someone because they've just tried to go, not got there. And then of course, when you blow, when you haven't quite made it, like that last 5 meters just feels like 5Ks. If you don't quite make it there and blow, there's no way you're even getting back into the second echelon when you come back. So that's the dickhead of the day for me, anyone that tried to do that. We didn't see too many of it on the telecast today, but I'm sure there was plenty out there.
Yeah, fair enough. So I was really trying to spot this, and I felt like overall it was a pretty good day by everyone. But the EF sprinter coming into the very final, he jumps onto Van der Poel's wheel. I think it's Bourdin, jumps onto Van der Poel's wheel, and Van der Poel just fades, and EF is out of the sprint from what I saw. Now, I don't want to throw shade. I'm literally clutching at straws trying to find a dickhead of the day here, but it did look like an interesting move for, Van der Poel was cooked at that point.
Yeah, that was
So,
Albanese, and
ah,
it's a funny one because Albanese won a stage, can't remember, one of the big 1 week stage races in the lead up to the tour, won a stage doing exactly the same thing where it was a bit of a chaotic finale. Everyone was on the limit. There wasn't really any control, and he just went away at the end and won and was just the strongest in that situation. So I think he might have just been thinking of a similar thing playing out there. I think it was Tour de Suisse where, he basically won from 4 guys that were just left, and he was just the strongest guy. And he's probably looked around at that point because all the lead out men had finished their job just to bring back Van der Poel. So he's thought, I can go now and I'll be fine. And there's always that lull at that point before the sprinters really open up. So he in hindsight, complete dickhead move. If he had waited, he could have run maybe a top 5 or even better. But you just never know in that situation. Also, he's not going to beat Milan or Merlier in a sprint. So that was probably his best chance, taking a flyer there, and they don't have a sprinter to finish it off, even if he did have someone there. So I think it was worth a try, but I agree with you. He did end up looking like a bit of a dickhead with having those kind of legs and just getting nothing for it.
Yeah. So then we move on to the women's Giro, which is now over. So we haven't done the stuff you missed from. We haven't done the stuff you missed from today. Did you have anything to throw in there, or do you think we've covered everything there?
A quick one. Instead of the sticky biddens from the Alpecin team car, we got a nice zoom in on the sticky pills from the team car. So I'm going to guess just a mixture of painkillers and caffeine coming from the team car during that stage, but not the best look for the team car, and they won't be that happy that the camera was on at that point, and it was pretty long handhold. But like you for most people, they just think, why are they holding hands out of the team car? But that's sticky pills at one point there instead of sticky biddens. And I think, like, in that kind of situation as well, I'm sure Van der Poel would have been getting similar treatment the other day when he was in the breakaway with Ben Healy when he took back yellow. And from the word of the Alpecin guys, whatever they're using in those finished bottles or pills or whatever, it's like completely above board and legal. Like, those guys will get tested 100% after, but they just tend to back up terribly the next day. So I think that's part of the reason we saw Van der Poel going terribly on the Mer de Bretagne stage compared to what he would usually be doing on that stage. Is if you're just taking a crazy amount of painkillers and caffeine, you're probably going to go deeper than you usually would, and you just end up paying for it eventually. So wasn't the best look for Alpecin there with the sticky pills out of the team car, but that was one thing that some people might not have picked up on at home.
Well, I didn't pick up on it, so yeah, good one. So with the women's Giro, I've got the recap of this if you're happy for me to take the lead on this one.
Yeah, wrap it up for us.
Yeah, so this is the final stage. It had 2,200 meters of climbing. And before I go any further, if you would like to read more information on this, I have pulled this from the Domestique article. So I read the article that they've got up there recapping the day, and I have just briefly summarized that. So if you want this in expanded form, they're doing some amazing coverage of the women's cycling there, and they've got a couple of articles up there that are wrapping up the Giro, or the women's Giro. So 2,200 meters of climbing today, 3 laps of the 2020 World Champions circuit after 30 Ks at the beginning. So Weavers went away claiming sprint points, just making sure that she shored that jersey up. And she also created a break that was joined by the legendary Amanda Spratt. Weavers dropped on the penultimate climb as the selected breakaway pulled them back. As the peloton pulled back the breakaway, and Spratt dropped then, but Silky Smulders from Liv Alula Jayco joined to put some impetus back in the break. Royce's then cranked up the pace to try and squeeze Longo Borghini but Longo Borghini had her number today and was very good at just holding her wheel. And then, speaking of being excellent at holding her wheel, Van der Breggen tried to drop Lippert from the break in the last 4Ks, but Lippert was glued to her wheel and was able to win that sprint. So Liana Lippert wins the final stage. Longo Borghini is the pink jersey winner. So she wins the Maglia Rosa. Reusser is in second, and Sarah Gigante is in third. Weavers is the points winner, and Gigante also wins the QOM.
Nicely done. Yeah. Again, I'm sure we'll hear more from Sarah after this because she is a Domestique creator. She also gives some great insights. She has a very different way of both training and racing compared to a lot of the women's peloton and a lot of cyclists in general, but it is clearly working very well for her at the moment. So to get some insight into that, head across to the Domestique platform and check out the stuff that Sarah has put out throughout the race and what I'm sure she'll be putting out over the next few days, because it was awesome to see those results, and great that next year we will be able to watch the women's Giro not clashing with the biggest men's race in the world.
Yeah, and if you have been following Sarah's story over the last, year really, push her to flicker a message on Instagram and just say, like, good on you, mate. The words of support, I'm sure, would go a long way. I don't think she would hate you for it. And yeah, just flood her inbox, make it known that heaps of people are with her and they're really proud of this recovery, because I think it is incredible.
Yeah, very much agree. We'll wrap it up and get on to tomorrow's stage, because Monday, for the first time in a very long time at the Tour, is not a rest day, because tomorrow is Bastille Day, which is the French national holiday. So we hit the first real hills. I wouldn't call them mountains, but they're getting pretty high, and we've got 4,300 meters of climbing tomorrow. So after a pretty nervous and pretty solid day today in the crosswinds, they're definitely going to feel it tomorrow, and I bet they'd be wishing that it was a rest day as per usual. So we've got 165 kilometers from Eneza to Le Mont d'Or Super Sancy, which is the final 3.5 kilometers at 7.7%. We've just got bergs the whole day, like up and down, just a lot of kind of 5, 6, 7K climbs at 7-6% a lot of the time. So it's a tricky one to pick, because I'm not sure there's enough really good climbers that are far enough down on GC yet for the right mix of a breakaway to be let go completely. It might be one of those days where it looks like it might go, and then a team jumps in and it ends up coming back together for a GC battle at the end. It's going to be really interesting how the riders pull up, because it's their 10th day in a row of racing, and most of those have been pretty solid. But my tip, look, it's sounding like a broken record for most of the first week, but I've got to go with Poggy for tomorrow. I don't think it's going to be a breakaway day, and just the punch he has at the moment, I can't see anyone dropping him in the climbs, and I can't see anyone beating him in an uphill sprint.
My tip, I'm going to be brave, and I'm going to say I think Luke Platt. I saw him sitting. He's been sitting at the back of the peloton for a while. I know that Jayco sits there and they look at stages like this and think that might be one that you could target. He did win one in the Giro. And yeah, I just think he has been sitting out the arse end of the peloton for a while, and he's either feeling rubbish or he's saving himself for something, letting the time gap go out so that they'll let him go. So I would love to see that. But if that doesn't happen and it isn't a break, I want to see Visma seem to have a plan to try and put people under pressure today. They seem to be trying to isolate Poggy. I would like to see Jonas try and hit Poggy tomorrow if it is a GC one, and Jonas try and get the stage win here.
Yeah, it would be cool to see. With Plappy, that's just his natural habitat down the back. I don't think he's been suffering too badly. No. He just loves to chill and stay out of trouble. But great tip, because he is certainly one that has lost enough time, because I think he has rolled in with the last riders every single day so far, which is going to be completely intentional because he will be targeting stages like this one tomorrow. So if it is a breakaway, perfect one for him. He's had a few easy days just cruising at the back of the peloton. So that is a very good tip there. We'll see how it plays out tomorrow, I guess.
Yeah, it's exciting. But with that, we apologize, but Cyrus and I are both going to be in transit tomorrow. I am flying back to Paradise in Sydney, and Cyrus is flying over to the hell on earth cesspit that is Nice. So I'm not jealous at all. But yeah, we will both likely. I will be at an airport hopefully watching the Tour de France, but I will be on a plane by the time that we would normally be recording this. And I think the same goes for you.
Yep, that's correct.
So we will do a recap day on Tuesday because it is a rest day. So we intend to recap the whole, well, not week that was, the whole 10 days that was, and then also recap tomorrow's stage. So by then it'll be old news, but we offer you an exciting package in that we will go over everything because I've already forgotten what happened in the first 2 days. So I'm sure you have as well.
Yep, definitely. No, thanks very much for tuning in today, and thanks for putting up with a few of our connection issues here in China. We will not make any 100% promises, but we should be pretty locked and loaded to not have to battle with any firewalls for the rest of the tour. And yeah, looking forward to being on the ground in France, despite being a long way from the race itself for most of it. And yeah, hit us up with anything that you want us to go over in the recap. If you've got any things that you liked or didn't like out of the first week, happy to hear them. And yeah, get over to the Domestique platform, give that a follow. Make sure you tell all your friends to tune into this podcast because we've certainly enjoyed doing it for the first week and looking forward to bringing more of it in the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, and we would love to see the numbers grow. They have been going up, but we would like to see them explode like the fireworks outside my window. So, yeah, if you can, share it with your mates. And, yeah, this has been fun. We'll see you in 2 days' time.
Thanks, guys.